My name is Caden Elise Hart. My childhood was a series of invisible moments. Birthdays where I blew out candles silently, hoping someone would notice the ache behind my eyes. School plays where I scanned the audience for faces that never showed. Dinner tables where praises flowed generously, but never toward my seat. Taylor, my younger sister, was always the center of our universe. From the moment she was born, she carried something special, an invisible glow my parents seemed eternally drawn to. Her first steps were recorded on videotape. Mine were vaguely remembered. Her laughter echoed through family dinners. My words often went unheard. I remember one Christmas vividly. I was 13 and had spent weeks carefully crafting a scarf for my mom, saving scraps of wool from art class, sneaking stitches after homework. Christmas morning, my heart raced as she unwrapped it. She smiled briefly, set it aside gently, and reached eagerly for Taylor's gift, a picture frame she had bought the day before. Mom's tears of joy streamed down her cheeks. "Taylor, this is perfect." I felt the scarf's rough edges under my fingertips, the imperfect knitting a mirror to my unraveling hope. In school, Taylor was crowned cheer captain. Every game ended with flowers and applause. Even when her grades slipped, my parents would shrug it off, saying, "School isn't everything." Yet, the nights I struggled over homework, fighting exhaustion after shifts washing dishes at the local diner, their silence spoke louder than words. "Caden, grades matter," my father would say whenever I brought home anything less than perfection. "You have to set an example for your sister." Somehow, despite setting examples every day showing resilience, determination, hard work, I was still invisible. Taylor dropped out of college after her freshman year, and somehow that, too, was celebrated. "She's finding herself," my parents explained at family dinners, applauding her bravery as if quitting were heroic. Meanwhile, I was working 3 jobs, fighting sleep in lectures, running from job to job with holes in my sneakers. Yet at dinner, I was asked, "Why aren't you more like your sister, Caden?" "She's not afraid to follow her heart." Following my heart never seemed like an option. Survival, perseverance, that was my lane. I couldn't afford to stumble or slow down. I had to keep going, no matter how much it hurt, no matter how invisible I felt. When college acceptances rolled in, I stood at the mailbox alone, clutching envelopes marked "Congratulations." My parents' smiles were brief, overshadowed by a sigh, a casual reminder that college was expensive, followed quickly by praise for Taylor's latest job, receptionist at a boutique downtown. The bitterness settled deeper inside me, shaping the corners of my heart into something hardened yet fragile. Each silent dismissal chipped away at the child who once believed she could be seen if only she tried hard enough. Graduation was supposed to be different. The moment where I could finally emerge from invisibility, holding my degree as proof that my struggles meant something. But even that became another chapter in my family's quiet betrayal. "We can't afford to come, Caden," my mother said, voice soft and dismissive over the phone. Yet the next day, Taylor called, gushing that Mom and Dad had wired her $1,200 to fly out and attend my graduation. "You know, Caden, to represent the family." "You'll be busy anyway," Taylor explained cheerfully, oblivious as ever. The ache in my chest deepened, filling my lungs until I struggled to breathe. "Let's not make everything about money, Caden," Mom whispered when I finally found the strength to ask why. Yet money had always defined the gaps between us, a measure of worth I constantly failed to meet. So I prepared myself to graduate alone, invisible once again. I didn't beg them to come, not this time. I had begged enough over the years, cried enough into silent nights to fill a lifetime, but even in my quiet, stubborn resolve, I secretly hoped they would surprise me, that just once, they'd choose to see me clearly. And as I sat, heart pounding in a stadium filled with laughter and cheers, searching desperately for familiar faces, my breath caught in my throat. The seats reserved for family were empty, and I realized then, painfully and powerfully, that even in my brightest moments, I was still the invisible child. I used to think if I just worked hard enough, someone would eventually notice. I believed that showing up day after day, sleepless night after sleepless night, would somehow earn me love, or at the very least, acknowledgement. But love, I've learned, doesn't always come when you earn it. Not in my house. Especially not for me. College wasn't just a milestone for me. It was a battleground. My days started before sunrise, in a half-lit kitchen making instant coffee and half-stale toast, slipping out the door quietly so I wouldn't disturb anyone else's sleep. I walked 2 miles to campus, even in the snow, because I couldn't justify spending money on the bus. Not when my books cost more than I made in a week. Bam, I was in class, pretending my notes weren't smudged with tears from the night before. I studied during lunch breaks, worked shifts at the bookstore, then clocked in for another job at the cafe across town. Sometimes I'd fall asleep on the bathroom floor between shifts. Sometimes I'd eat leftover muffins because I couldn't afford groceries that week. I never told anyone. Not my professors. Not my friends. Certainly not my parents. They were too busy planning trips to visit Taylor in different cities, her short-lived adventures, each one treated like an epic. When I called once to say I got an A in a brutal class, my mom said, "That's great. Taylor's thinking about opening a jewelry shop. Isn't that cute?" I learned to stop sharing. I learned to cheer for myself. The library became my sanctuary. I curled up with textbooks and whispered prayers into the silence, hoping the pages would carry me out of this life. The security guard once offered me his jacket when I stayed until 11 a.m. in a thin hoodie. That meant more than anything my family ever said to me. I worked holidays. I missed birthdays. I spent Christmas alone one year because I couldn't afford the flight home, and no one offered to help. No one noticed I wasn't there until Taylor posted a family photo and someone asked in the comments, "Where's Caden?" The comment had no replies. I kept pushing. One semester became two. Two became four. Each one layered with more jobs, more exhaustion, more quiet resentment. I learned how to sew my sneakers back together when the soles cracked. I learned how to survive. I thought graduation would be the moment where all of it came together. I imagined my parents crying in the crowd, finally seeing what I'd built out of nothing. I dreamed of the proud hug, the congratulations, the maybe even, "We're sorry we didn't see it sooner." But then I got the call. "Caden," Mom said, her voice too casual, "we won't be able to make it out there. Flights are just too expensive." I remember sitting on my dorm bed, clutching my phone, staring at the ceiling, trying not to let the silence swallow me. "It's okay." I lied. "I understand." The next day, Taylor texted me a selfie of her in sunglasses at the airport. "Guess who's flying in to represent the fam?" My heart clenched. I stared at the photo until it blurred. My sister, grinning on her fully funded trip to my graduation. A trip my parents said they couldn't afford for themselves. They gave her $1,200. I did the math. That was 3 months of groceries, 2 semesters of used books, rent. I stared at the number until it became a symbol of everything I already knew but didn't want to believe. I wasn't worth it to them. I kept thinking maybe they'd surprise me. Maybe they were lying, and they'd walk into the stadium with proud smiles and a handmade sign. Maybe Taylor was the distraction before the big reveal. But when graduation day came, my name was the only one written on the card. And the crowd, full of strangers. The only eyes that searched for me were the ones on cameras. The only cheers from people who didn't know how much it cost me to sit in that seat. I had sacrificed everything to get there. And they didn't even come. Graduation was supposed to mean something. After everything I'd clawed my way through, every sleepless night, every shift I worked until my hands trembled, every meal I skipped to afford books, I thought walking across that stage would be the moment it all felt worth it. But the closer it got, the heavier it felt. I tried not to hope. I told myself not to expect anything from them. But the child inside me, the one who used to glue macaroni to cards and wait for praise, still dreamed of my parents showing up. Just this once. Choose me. Instead, they chose Taylor, again. "We sent Taylor money for the flight," Mom said, like it was some gift to me. "She'll be there to represent the family. You'll be busy anyway, honey." I didn't answer at first. I felt like the air had left the room. "You said you couldn't afford to come." I managed, my voice thin and flat. "Well," she replied, and I could already hear the irritation creeping in. "Let's not make everything about money, Caden." But it was about money. It always had been. Just not for me. Taylor had a new phone before her old one ever cracked. She got braces, dance lessons, birthday parties with balloon arches and custom cakes. When I needed textbooks, I borrowed. When I chipped my tooth, I waited until it ached so badly I couldn't sleep. And now, for the biggest day of my life, they chose to wire my sister $1,200 instead of flying out themselves. She's flying first class, Taylor told me in a voice note. Like it was a joke. Dad said I deserve it. Haha. I laughed too, but it wasn't funny. The laugh caught in my throat and curdled into something bitter, something sharp. I stopped responding to her messages after that. I knew she didn't mean harm. Taylor had always lived in the glow of being the favorite, but she never asked for it. She didn't see the shadows it cast on me. She couldn't. That night, I laid out my graduation dress on the bed. Simple, black, borrowed from a friend. I smoothed the wrinkles with my palm and stared at it until my eyes burned. I didn't cry. I was tired of crying for people who couldn't even show up the week of graduation. My roommates' families flooded our tiny apartment with balloons and laughter. Someone's dad grilled burgers out front. Someone else's mom brought a scrapbook. The hallway smelled like perfume and home. My room stayed quiet. I wanted to be happy. I wanted to scream. I did it. I wanted someone to look me in the eye and say, "We're proud of you, Caden. We see you." Instead, I sat alone at night, reading over my valedictorian speech until the words blurred. It was supposed to be a victory, but it felt like abandonment. Everywhere I looked was a reminder that this celebration wasn't built for someone like me. Not for the girl who climbed her way out without help. Not for the one who was easy to forget. Still, I showed up. I picked up my cap and gown. I signed the forms. I wrote the speech. I walked past the mirror and didn't recognize the girl in the reflection. She looked tired, hollowed out, but determined. Because if no one else would clap for me, I would, because I had survived. And maybe that didn't mean something to them, but it had to mean everything to me. The morning of graduation, I woke before my alarm. It was still dark out. Quiet. I sat up in bed, staring at the cap and gown hanging on the back of my door like they belonged to someone else. Someone whose parents were probably already on their way, camera in hand, full of plans for dinner after. Someone who mattered. I got dressed in silence. The dress I'd borrowed felt tight across my chest, like it was struggling to hold everything in, every ache, every disappointment. I pinned my hair back, one bobby pin at a time, steadying shaking fingers. There were no flowers waiting on the counter. No notes slipped under my door. Just the sound of my roommates laughing down the hall, families buzzing around them. I tried not to listen, tried not to imagine how it would have felt to be one of them. My Uber driver was a kind older man who asked if my parents were meeting me there. I smiled politely and said they couldn't make it. He didn't press, but he did wish me luck, and somehow that made my throat tighten more than I expected. The stadium was enormous. Echoes of laughter and joy bounced through the air. The sky, too blue to feel real. Rows of families waved signs and held bouquets. Students beamed into camera flashes. I scanned the crowd, even though I told myself I wouldn't. I looked until my eyes hurt, but they weren't there. No mom, no dad, no sister in a bright dress waving from the bleachers. Just strangers. Rows and rows of strangers cheering for someone else's kid. I took my seat on the field, heart thudding so loudly it drowned out the opening remarks. My name was on the program, my speech printed and folded in my pocket. But all I could think about was the empty seats I had reserved, just in case. I kept turning my head, half expecting them to come running in, breathless and late, whispering, "Apologies." They didn't. I should have been used to this by now. But the truth is, it never hurts less. You just get better at hiding the bruise. One of my professors walked by and squeezed my shoulder. "You made it, Caden, all on your own." And something about the way she said it, like it was a badge of honor, not a wound, made me sit up a little straighter. Still, my hands trembled as they called the first names. The sun beat down on us. The crowd clapped endlessly. I clapped too, for everyone around me. I smiled when the cameras panned, but inside, I was holding myself together with a thread. Then the chancellor approached the podium. He cleared his throat, and the stadium hushed. Each year, we honor a graduate who has demonstrated extraordinary resilience in the face of hardship, he began. This year, we award a full-ride law fellowship, funded by our university and esteemed partners, to a student who embodies grit, grace, and quiet strength. My ears rang. I wasn't thinking of me. I was still looking around, scanning for familiar faces, still hoping for a miracle. Then he said my name, loud, clear, echoing off every wall. Gasps, applause, whispers. I stood up slowly, heart in my throat. The cameras turned, and just as I took my first step toward the stage, I saw them, late, out of breath. My parents, holding a bouquet, looking around. Not at me. Not yet. They were looking for Taylor, but she wasn't there. I was. I climbed the stairs, my name still being clapped for. I looked out over the crowd, scanning one last time, and that's when they saw me. Their faces froze, eyes locked with mine. And for the first time, I didn't smile to make them comfortable. I didn't wave. I didn't shrink. I just stood there, in my borrowed dress and borrowed strength, holding the weight of every invisible year. And I let them see exactly who they had overlooked. They called my name like it meant something, like it had weight. Caden Elise Hart, the chancellor said again, drawing out each syllable as though it belonged in gold letters. The applause didn't stop, the sun didn't feel as harsh anymore. The ache in my chest loosened. My hands stopped trembling. I stepped up to the microphone and unfolded my speech. The paper was warm from my pocket, the edges soft from being held too tight. I looked out over the crowd and saw the blur of people on their feet, faces I didn't know, but who somehow looked proud of me. The camera light blinked red, the stage lights shimmered, and in the corner of my eye there they were, my parents, frozen at the edge of the crowd, bouquet still clutched tightly. Taylor wasn't beside them. Just them alone, blinking up at me in disbelief. I held their gaze for a second. Then I looked away. I cleared my throat and began to speak. I want to thank the people who didn't make it here today, I said, because sometimes the absence of love teaches you how to build it for yourself. The crowd quieted. You could hear the wind moving through the open air. I spent the last 4 years learning how to carry things that were never mine to carry. I worked. I studied. I failed. I tried again. I did it with holes in my shoes and doubt in my chest. But I did it. I paused, letting the words hang there. This moment doesn't erase the struggle. It doesn't rewrite what I went through. But it proves something I once didn't believe, that I am worthy of more, of better, of everything they told me I shouldn't expect. I didn't cry. Not until I stepped away from the podium and someone, an advisor I barely knew, wrapped me in a tight hug and whispered, "I'm proud of you." It broke something open. The little girl inside me, the one who used to stand at the edge of rooms hoping someone would see her, finally felt seen. I walked off the stage into a tide of congratulations. Strangers shook my hand. Students nodded at me with knowing smiles. One girl said, "Thank you for saying that. I needed to hear it." I nodded back. It wasn't about vengeance, or spite, or proving my family wrong. It was about finally feeling like I could stop proving anything to anyone. I had done enough. More than enough. My parents never approached me. They lingered in the background like an echo from a life I used to chase. I saw them speak to a staff member, gesturing toward the stage, confused, embarrassed, out of place. They didn't have a seat. Because they hadn't planned to be there. Because they hadn't believed it would matter. I didn't go to them. Not right away. Not with arms wide open. I stood with my peers, took photos, accepted hugs, signed programs. I let myself be celebrated by those who saw the work, not just the title. Eventually, I saw my parents making their way out of the stadium. I watched them leave, watched my mother look over her shoulder one last time, eyes catching mine for a second. She opened her mouth like she might say something, but she didn't, and neither did I, because sometimes silence speaks louder than forgiveness, because sometimes being recognized doesn't mean being acknowledged by those who never chose you. Sometimes it just means you finally chose yourself. They were late. I saw it on their faces, the way they scanned the crowd, the confusion knitting between their brows. My mother clutched a bouquet so tight the cellophane crinkled with every heartbeat. My father adjusted his shirt collar like the heat was pressing in. They looked around like tourists lost in a city they thought they knew, and the irony, they were searching for Taylor. I knew it in the way their eyes moved, desperately, hopefully, as if she might wave from the crowd or step onto the stage. But Taylor wasn't there. She never had been, and they were the only ones who didn't realize it. Instead, I was not in a seat, not watching from the audience. I was center stage, name echoing off every wall, fellowship in hand, spotlight on me. They didn't recognize me at first. Maybe it was the distance, or maybe it was disbelief. After all, I'd been the background child for so long. I imagine they forgot what I looked like when I stood tall. When my name was called and I stepped up, their heads snapped toward the stage. My mother gasped. My father didn't move. It took a full 5 seconds before realization bloomed. She's the one. That's Caden. The moment stretched out like wet laundry on a line, heavy, fragile, waiting to drop. They stood in the aisle, bouquet useless in my mother's arms, nothing to say, nowhere to go. People clapped all around them. A stranger bumped my father's shoulder and said, "She's amazing, huh?" He nodded slowly, lips pressed thin. I didn't acknowledge them. I stood tall in the center of the stage, blinking into the brightness, letting the applause wash over me like ocean waves. For once, I didn't dim myself to make them feel better. I didn't shrink to fit their expectations. I had made it up the mountain they pretended wasn't there, and now that I was at the summit, they finally looked up. It was strange, seeing them so small from up there. After the ceremony, I saw them again by the entrance. My mom's eyes were red. My dad looked like he wanted to speak but kept swallowing the words. Taylor's absence hung between us like smoke. They didn't approach. Maybe they weren't sure how. Maybe they were ashamed. Maybe they were still trying to understand how the girl they overlooked had become the woman commanding the room. Or maybe they were waiting for me to come to them. But I didn't. I walked right past, surrounded by classmates and faculty, flowers from a friend in my arms. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I caught my mother's eye for a brief second. She gave me a tight smile, a shrug, the kind that said, "Well, you did it," as if it had been easy. As if she'd had a hand in it, but I had done it without them. Every step, every sacrifice, every night I thought I wouldn't make it. And now, here they were, late, with flowers not meant for me, hoping to cheer for someone who never arrived, never needed it, never earned it. They had spent my entire life choosing Taylor. But on the day that counted, Taylor didn't show. I did. I walked away, the sound of their hesitation behind me like fading echoes in a long hallway. For the first time in my life, I didn't wonder what they were thinking. I didn't wait for them to catch up, because I finally understood. They were not late to my graduation. They were late to my life. And I had no intention of waiting anymore. It happened in a breath. I was standing at the edge of the reception, a small cup of sparkling cider in my hand, when I felt it. A shift, a tension threading through the air, pulling me backward like gravity had teeth. I turned. There they were. My parents, alone. No Taylor, no cheering, no distraction. Just them, watching me from across the room like they were waiting for permission to step into a story they hadn't read. And for the first time, I let them look. I didn't flinch. I didn't drop my gaze or smile to make it easier. I met their eyes and held it. It was raw, like standing barefoot on glass. I could feel everything in that stare. The years of silence, the missed birthdays, the one-way phone calls, the way my name always tasted like second place on their tongues. My mom took a step forward, then paused. My dad's jaw clenched, then loosened. He looked tired, not from travel, not from time, but from truth. The kind that doesn't let you sleep when it finally catches up. I could see it in their eyes. They were trying to figure out if they had the right to be proud. They didn't know the version of me standing before them. The woman who had climbed out of the pit they left her in. The woman who didn't need them to be whole anymore. And I realized something then. I didn't hate them. I had spent years thinking I did, trying to untangle love from grief, fury from longing. But standing there, eye to eye, I felt something else entirely. I felt done. Done waiting. Done hoping. Done bleeding for people who wouldn't even bring a bandage. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want a screaming match or an apology etched in shaky voices. I just wanted to be free. And I was. Because they could look at me now and finally see what I had always known deep down, even when they tried to convince me otherwise, that I had worth, that I had value, that I had built something unshakable from the rubble they left behind. My mom mouthed something I couldn't hear. Maybe it was my name. Maybe it was sorry. But I didn't need to decode it. I'd spent too many years trying to make sense of what she didn't say. So I just nodded once, not out of forgiveness, not out of invitation, but out of closure. Then I turned, not because I was hurt, but because I wasn't anymore. I walked toward my friends, toward laughter, toward love that had shown up when it mattered, toward the version of life I built with my own calloused hands. Behind me, they stayed frozen, and maybe they would talk on the ride home. Maybe they'd argue, maybe they'd regret, or maybe they wouldn't. But I wouldn't know, because I had let go, and that eye contact, that was goodbye. I didn't feel like a hero walking away. And no slow motion exit. No cinematic music, just the steady beat of my own footsteps on concrete, moving toward the parking lot, the borrowed flowers in my hands already starting to wilt in the sun, but every step felt real. I passed the balloon arches, the photo booths, the families holding each other like trophies. My classmates posed for pictures wrapped in pride. I smiled at them, not bitter, just distant, like I was walking out of a world I was never fully invited into. My phone buzzed. A message from Taylor. Heard you got some kind of fellowship thing? That's wild. Proud of you, big sis 3. I stared at it for a second. And no mention of the ceremony. No clue she hadn't been the one the flowers were meant for. No idea she'd just missed a moment our parents finally saw me. Typical. I turned the phone face down in my hand and kept walking. There was no need to reply. Not now, maybe not ever, because the version of me that used to chase after crumbs was already fading in the rearview. I stopped at the bus stop down the block, the one I used to wait at every day, coat zipped to my chin, fingers stiff with cold. I sat on the bench, graduation cap in my lap, and breathed for the first time all day. Really breathed. Not for survival, not through gritted teeth, but full lungs, full chest, the kind of breath that says, "You're still here." A woman across the bench glanced at me, then at the cap. "Graduated today?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah." She smiled. "You should be proud." "That's not easy." I blinked at her, stunned by the kindness of a stranger. "Thanks," I said softly. "I am." And I meant it. It didn't matter that the people I once needed most hadn't clapped for me. It didn't matter that they brought flowers for the wrong child. What mattered was that I stood on that stage anyway, that I looked them in the eye, that I walked away, not to punish them, but to free myself, because there's something sacred about choosing yourself, about deciding you are no longer available for abandonment, about refusing to keep your arms open for people who always arrive empty-handed. I sat on that bench long after the ceremony ended. The city buzzed around me, cars passing, kids running, past in little caps from some daycare graduation. Life kept moving, but for once, I wasn't rushing to catch up. I was still, steady enough. A girl walked by with a balloon and said, "Happy graduation," like it was the most obvious thing in the world. And I smiled. "Thanks," I said. "It really is." The day after graduation, I woke up to sunlight instead of an alarm. And no shift to clock into. No paper to write. Just silence. Stillness. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel behind. I made oatmeal and ate it slow, watching steam curl in the air like smoke off a battlefield finally cleared. My body ached in strange places, shoulders, back, jaw, but it felt different. Not exhaustion. More like the kind of soreness that comes after a long climb. Earned. Honorable. I looked around my apartment. Still half packed. The walls bare. Tomorrow, I'd be moving across the country to start the law fellowship. A full ride. Full time. Full circle moment. I still couldn't believe it. I had no furniture waiting, no plan beyond the address I scribbled on a post-it. But I wasn't afraid. I had done harder things with less. The emails were already rolling in congrats from professors, former employers, even classmates who had never looked twice at me in lecture halls. The university posted a clip from my speech. It had gone viral. People were resharing it with captions like "This is resilience" and "Someone give her a TED talk." I didn't know how to respond to it all, so I did not yet. I let it wash over me like warm water after a storm, but I saved the messages, not to prove anything, just to remember. Later that afternoon, I walked to the local thrift store to find a suitcase. Mine had ripped weeks ago and I hadn't planned to replace it. I found one with a broken zipper and a faded sticker on the side that said "Property of someone going somewhere." I bought it for $5. It felt right. When I got back, there was a letter in my mailbox. Handwritten. No return address. Inside, a card. "We're sorry we weren't there earlier. We're proud of you. Love, Mom and Dad." No bouquet, no call, just 10 words. And strangely, it didn't undo me. I folded the card and placed it in a drawer. I didn't know if they meant it, if it was guilt or grace or habit, but I knew this much. I wasn't going to build my future on apology. I was already building it on truth. That night, I sat on the floor with my new suitcase and a Sharpie. I stared at the faded sticker and added 3 more words beneath it. She made it. And I had. Not in the way they expected. Not in the way they celebrated. But in the way that mattered most. I made it to myself. And now, I was moving forward. Not with a clean slate, but with a strong spine, a soft heart, and a story I finally didn't feel ashamed to call my own. The path ahead wasn't easy, but it was mine. And I was ready to walk it. It's been 3 years since that day. The fellowship turned into a job. The job turned into a calling. I'm now a public interest attorney, standing beside people who know what it means to be overlooked, unheard, unseen. People like me. And every time I walk into a courtroom, I carry a part of that girl who once waited for her family in a stadium filled with strangers. She's still with me. Not as a wound anymore, but as a witness. My apartment now has furniture. Real furniture. Not milk crates and borrowed rugs. There's a little couch by the window where I drink tea in the morning. A desk covered in highlighters and post-it notes. A growing collection of worn-out sneakers by the door, proof that I still run toward what matters, even if I move slower. Now, I talk to Taylor sometimes. Not often. She sends memes, the occasional check-in. We exist in a strange middle ground, not close, but not gone. I don't resent her anymore. She didn't ask to be the favorite. She just never questioned it. My parents. We speak. Holiday cards. A call on birthdays. Surface-level things. They ask about work. Say they're proud. But we don't revisit the past. I don't need to. I don't carry it like armor anymore. I don't carry it at all. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't always a grand moment. Sometimes it's a quiet decision to stop reopening the same wound. Sometimes it's just saying, that happened. It hurt, but I'm still here. And I am still here, still standing, still building. There's a photo of me from graduation day. On my bookshelf, standing at the podium, eyes forward, no smile. People think it's solemn, but to me, it's powerful. It's the moment I chose myself. I've made peace with not getting the apology I once begged for. I've stopped needing my pain to be validated by the ones who caused it. That's the thing about healing. It's not loud. It's not a spotlight. It's soft, patient. It comes quietly, often when you least expect it, and says, you can rest now. And I do. Some mornings, I pass other girls on their way to class. Backpacks heavy, eyes tired. I see myself in them. And when I can, I stop. I say, you're doing great. Because sometimes, that's all someone needs to keep going. To be seen. To be reminded that they matter. Kate and Elise Hart. That name means something now. It's stitched on the edge of my office door. It's signed at the bottom of my briefs. It's whispered in quiet prayers and shouted in tiny victories. I earned it, every syllable. I don't need to prove it anymore, not to them, not to anyone, because I know I made it. And that's enough.